Hello, my fellow voyagers, and welcome to Soul Specs Healing Abyss. I am your host, Ja. Welcome to the first episode. So, let's just jump right in. This podcast is going to be about the soul being able to have the space to search itself without the interference of the conditioned human mind or avatar or environments that were created for us. What I have learned on this journey is that resting is trusting the process to progress. And when I allowed my body to really listen to itself and really trust my emotions, not just what I wanted hedonistically. Those are wants like lust and things of that nature, but like what my body really needed, which is rest. It needed me to take a break from all of the conditioning that was given to me and all of the things that I became through that conditioning. And so for me, I sped through life not trusting my own process and not trusting my own progress. And because it wasn't my own truth, I was constantly chasing something and running after something that wasn't authentically me. So, of course, I always felt tired, right? Like when you're younger, it's all conditional, it's all given to you. So you have to take that time to really allow yourself to feel through it. And when I finally took the time as an adult to really listen to myself, I've been through so much. My past is not my tale, but it is definitely something that I have gained so much wisdom from by so much falling on my face, like really just going out there and just allowing myself to try. It feels really scary to try something that no one else is trying, but everyone else is praising it or putting it on a pedestal or appreciating the value of someone stepping outside of themselves, yet they don't trust themselves enough to do the same. And then it creates this weird anxiety where we feel trapped, right? We feel like we are in a world that's not our own. And so for me, I wanted to create a podcast about allowing the soul to listen to the souls of its past life and working through all unhealed, all untouched or witnessed or involved, whatever word you want to use, whatever energy of its past that it was like, I wish I had did that, or I should have did that, or man, I knew I should have did that, or I could have did that, and they didn't. And I feel that for me in the spirituality world, you can feel these energies all around us, but we don't know what they mean. And so it's easy, of course, to say, go out and do something you've never done before, but it does take a lot more hyping yourself up, really trusting that process. And so for me, I learned that one of the first things I had to learn, so this is going to be broken down into 1, 2, 3 segments, but it's all going to be the same podcast, clearly. So for me, the importance of achieving goals became my new, what they say, Roman Empire per se. I still don't fully understand that concept, but I do understand what they mean, where it's something you stand by, something you think about every day, something that could have changed or would have changed history or how it changed history, and what my own individual involvement in that would be. And so every day I find ways to discuss the idea that rest is not just a break from work, right? Like we get off work, we think like, oh, finally I'm off work. I'm going to go to the bar. I'm going to go hang out with my friends. I'm going to go do this other thing. And even though those are things that can bring us joy, they're not rest per se, right? Because we're still going and putting ourselves in others' energy. And we have to remember it's a very essential part to the journey towards success, which is being social and interacting and being a part of a community. But I recognize that many people have become their own drone per se, right? They've gotten lost in mimicking others' lifestyles, others' behaviors, others' characteristics, cultures per se. Again, it's all here to be shared. That's literally what we do. We observe each other and share what we see, right? That's what becomes trends. But when we forget that our physical body may love interacting, or our spiritual soul may love interacting, but our body doesn't want to. This is what I consider to be social anxiety, where my mind might feel like I want to be there, my energy might feel like I want to be there, but my body is like shutting down because it's too much stimulation. Same way where my body might love going out, but my soul is like, I need rest, which is where you'll see someone sitting at the bar by themselves, usually isolated, not talking to anyone, but they're there observing and watching because it's like, yeah, I like going out, but I don't need to interact per se to feel like I'm a part of something. And so this is where I started to pay attention to that micro macro aspect of how we really choose to rest. So this is where I started to then recognize that I had to explore how I was taking breaks and allowing myself to actually rest so that then we're able to go out and contribute into the world where we can then have what we say increased productivity, creativity, and overall well-being, right? When we know that we feel well rested, what is that? So for me, as soon as I get off work, I just turn off everything and sit there for about 10 to 15 minutes sometimes. I don't do anything. I just stare out the window and I let my music play and I just say nothing. I do nothing. I I feel my body vibrating. I feel the energy like all over. Like I can just feel the electricity moving through my body. And I just wait until that energy settles because I think again we as humans we don't really get the opportunity to stop and think about like we're literally the universe. We're walking universes and we have particles and cells and muscle and mucus and blood and all these things that make us, right? But they're all still found in nature. So I really found ways to reconnect with nature. I allowed myself to listen to what my body was trying to tell me versus what my mind was always telling me, right? For me, I am someone who comes from a background of very anxious parents who were overly protective but loving, but there was always something to think about and worry about and think about and worry about, which looking back now, I understand. You know, I can look back at history and understand where my parents were, who they were, what they were going through, and the choices they had to make with the resources they were given. Meaning, educational, governmental, whatever that might be, they always were able to articulate their thoughts. They were very educated, but we still had emotional parts of our history that weren't worked through. And so those things became trauma, right? And that trauma then became different types of diagnosis and illness and mindsets and temperaments because, again, we were not allowing ourselves to rest in that process of trusting the body when it's telling us how to rest, right? The heart, it clearly is going to run 24 hours. That is something we hope it does, right? But the main thing for the heart is we do want to keep it at a nice even keel. I mean, if you get it going too fast and get it going too high, you can get up to that tachycardia and get your heart racing too fast, and now your blood's flowing and you might make yourself pass out. Or if it's going too slow, same thing, you start getting into that deep sleep. And this is a great place to be meditative wise, but if your heart is slowing down on you, that's probably not something you want, right? So it's knowing how to find the middle, finding the middle to where we need rest. So for me, I used to be an avid runner. Still love running if I can, but I cannot run because I'm too tall and it affects my knees. So I went to walking, and now I walk daily. I love it. It's my form of meditation because I can put in my music, I can go out and move my body. I don't have to feel rushed, but I'm still getting movement, right? So that's where I was able to find rest even in movement. I think a lot of times we think that rest is just sitting still. Rest is giving a pause. Rest is giving a momentary break just to let something breathe, right? And I had to then explore how I was sharing the practicality of life with not just my physical avatar, but with my soul and the soul consciousness, because we don't really stop to think about our ancestors the way we really should as the emotional beings that they were, not just the physical figures that they can represent in history, but the emotional presence of who they are and were. You can still feel this to this day when we talk about legacy, and there's celebrities that forever till this day, I mean, it's 100 years later, we're still talking about them. That's the energy that someone puts out into the world through their avatar. The avatar, the human body, has to first trust itself when it needs rest. Because the soul and the souls of the past, they no longer have physical form. So they're going to want to use you as much as they can, because in their mind, everything's infinite, everything is endless, everything's replaceable, right? For us, we are still feeling the sensations, the pains, the time of how things pass and go and come. This is where we then start getting connected to source. Source can be whatever it represents to you as far as what we call God. Source energy for me is the same thing, but what is it about this energy that it's able to intertwine and weave and web and correlate and connect all things, right? It doesn't matter what it is, it's in everything. I always say love is in hate, because even within groups of hate, they're finding some sense of community and family, which is love, right? Essentially. And so even though it might be distorted love, it's a type of love. And I kept going back and thinking about, wow, how am I loving myself all the way through? How am I processing how to really listen to when my body's saying, I need you to love yourself, which is rest. I had an old friend of mine. I moved to this small town in Iowa, beautiful town, and super chill, super hippie like, progressive. I love it. It's called Fairfield, Iowa, and they were telling me about right when COVID happened. You know, everything was just happening for everyone, and for me, this was the perfect opportunity to produce content, because I never gave myself the time to do it because I was always racing through life, right? And then for them, when I started posting and just nonstop posting, that was during a time when everyone was kind of hurting and feeling kind of crappy and not knowing what life was going to be. And I knew for myself, after going through my own isolation phase and a lot of random life hardships, I saw that, well, someone still has to be able to keep pulling that train, right? Even though the train has slowed down. It still has to keep operating. And for me, that's where my mind and love was coming from. And for them, they saw it the opposite. They saw it as pushing energy on people. And at that time, I was like, absolutely not. This person is not supportive. They do not need to be in my life. You can go. Because at that time, that was my first opportunity to express myself. I wasn't thinking I was doing anything that made other people feel rushed. But when I step back now and look at it, at that time, the content of how I put it out there was very much suck it up, get out, go out there and go live your best life. And for some people that works, for some it doesn't. This is the duality of life. I always say there's like the dualistic part, but then there's the polarized part. The polarized parts are connected by the duality of the connection in between. You have black and white, well, gray's in the middle. That's the dualistic part where technically they're the same, but they're not, right? And so that's the part where our soul dwells. That's the part of us where I believe the heart dwells. And it's able to then go into that place of saying, I can make practical thoughts out of logical choices because my emotions were balanced and well rested. So I said a lot. Let me kind of pull some of this back to summarize it, because the main point that I'm incorporating here is that we don't want to burn ourselves out spiritually, because that will then burn ourselves out emotionally, which burns us out mentally. So the trifecta that I've learned when I've taken the time to rest. So back to my own, I can say, what's the word I'm looking for? The things I do to make me feel better. I know there's a word for it, but I can't think. Routine, there it is. So my routine, let's say I had a really hard day at work. I get off, it was a busy day, everyone was emailing me, texting me, nonstop talking, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. I get off work, log out, sit at my desk for about 10 to 15 minutes, just letting my body catch up to itself. Right after that, I will go put on some music. I will put on cartoons because that's what my inner child loves. I'm allowed to kind of just sit back and relax and not think about what's going on in the world when, something from my childhood or something that has nostalgia is on. And weirdly so, I learned that like having the music on calms my mind. My ears hear the sound, the vibrations relax me. And then playing cartoons or something on the TV, that calms my mind visually. So now I have the sensory sounds coming in, calming the vibrations. Then I have these sensory sounds and lights coming through visually that, for some reason for me, calms me because it lets me zone out. It's enough stimulation for my body to take in, but let me kind of zone out or zen out, right? And then that's the time when I actually go like play a video game or like write something or color or draw and just give my body something extra to do if it chooses to. That's how I rest. I know for someone else, they might be like, that sounds like a lot. But this is why I say it's important to understand how to trust your process to progress, because I kept trying to do it the way everyone else does, which is literally trying to do nothing. I'm not built like that, right? Like, I know how to take the time to take a break, but my mind and my energy always wants to create. I love creating. It's how I stay connected to source. It's how I stay connected to my inner child. And it's how I keep myself balanced. By doing this, where I'm able to then say, okay, how am I now going to explore the concept of trust in the context of personal and professional development? So this is where I'm one of those people where I worked since I was a kid. I mean, I've been working since the age of, I would say, I started working like around 11, working on farms, working on orchards, then getting into like restaurants, washing dishes and stuff like that. And then I got into like corporate, like Toys R Us and Marshalls and clothing department stores and stuff. And then I was able to use my education to get into like universities and government and administrative and stuff like that, which gave me a plethora of concepts and ideas and experience to play with and work with. This is the part of spirit that is the blueprint and the roadmap that I think a lot of us miss. I think for myself personally, I thought that I was just one of those jack of all trades, right? I thought that I was just one of those people who was just meant to jump from job to job and not have a purpose or a function, just doing it because I had to. And even though most of the jobs I applied to, I thought I was just apply to, funny enough, spirit, universe, source, ancestors always had something lined up for me. They always will have something lined up for us. They will always put you in the right place if you allow yourself to pay attention. My trusting of rest came with silence in my mind. So when I get a thought and I start feeling something about what I think I should do, if it feels anxious and anxiety filled, I know it doesn't belong to me. I know it doesn't. I know it's something that is conditional, some trauma, something that I need to work through, right? When it comes to me easily, no resistance, right away, that's source. That's ancestor. That's spirit. That's someone saying, listen, you're still plugged into this stream. You're still plugged into this frequency. This is part of your birthright. You're never not going to have access to this type of energy. But if we don't know how to rest within ourselves, then we don't know how to rest on the outside, and we start rushing into situations that we don't really want. Moving, housing, relationships, jobs, whatever. And then we get there and we're like, oh, I thought this was the right thing. It felt right. It felt good. And it's like, if you had given yourself time to rest on it, then the alignment of the puzzle pieces start falling into place. I've witnessed and recognized when you give yourself about maybe a week or so, I usually say first 3 days. First 3 days, if I'm still feeling a certain way about it, and I'm still feeling like I'm supposed to do something about it, for some reason, I don't trust it. I don't know where that comes from, but I'm just like, if I'm still marinating on it 3 days later, it's not for me. If within the first 24 hours, I'm like, yes, this is it. This is what I want. I trust it. Now, I'm not saying that's correct or not, because what I've learned in that process is both answers are right. When I rush into something that feels good, that feels right, without resting my thoughts, without resting my emotions, without resting my logic, just going straight to what I know, that's when I realized in that moment, I was like, oh, that's an old soul timeline. We've been here before. It's familiar. That's why it feels good. We know what it is. That's why we like it. And when we get what it is and we fulfill its purpose in our life, that's when we start wanting more and needing more and going out of that restful place versus being in peace where we thought we would be if we had this thing that we've already had. To navigate around that, I've learned that 3-day mark where if I'm still thinking about it, that means I'm supposed to be thinking about it only because it's given me the opportunity to learn something. It doesn't mean that the opportunity is meant for me to take. It does mean the opportunity is meant for me to reconsider and think about and wonder why I don't want to take it, because this is another way of helping you learn and develop professionally and personally. Don't believe that you have to do something just because your world that you know has been built around it, right? There's a lot of us where we grew up in certain environments, certain things, cultures, whatever, conditioning, that we're supposed to be this because we grew up here, because we talk this way, act this way, live this way. We're supposed to do this, right? That's the ego always. The ego wants you to believe whatever it can convince you to believe. And if we convince ourselves of it, then we are going to fall out of trust. And then this is when the inner child starts feeling unloved, unheard, unwanted. Because it's like, I tried to tell you this is not what I want to do, but you said we have to do it for survival. And because we have to do it for survival, now we're stuck feeling like we have to survive again. This journey is never going to really make sense. Even now, as I talk to you, it doesn't ever make sense to me. I speak what I feel and what I know, and if it comes out in a way that makes sense, perfect. If it doesn't, that's okay. It might activate something later. This is the resting part, right? When we can clear our thoughts of thoughts that don't belong to us, when new thoughts come in, it's much easier to read what those thoughts are meant to be read as. There is so much contextual information and contextual value that gets lost in translation of us not allowing ourselves to share stories and examples of how we as individuals or how us as businesses have achieved remarkable success, right? Like, we don't talk about the embracing patience. Oof, let's say that again. Embracing patience. That is one of the hardest things that I had to learn how to do, because as a content creator, you have so many ideas. You have so much to give. You have so much you want to give. And you keep producing and you go out and market your stuff and you talk about it and you celebrate it and people celebrate you, but it's not selling or moving or getting the same reactions that you want out of people. And that's the part of the artistic journey that I learned. That's not art. That's you trying to live out of survival. And as much as that sucks to hear, we have to recognize as artists, as creators, as co-creators, as avatars to Mother Gaia, we are not meant to feel attached to our creations. We're supposed to put it out there in the universe and let it become whatever it needs to, just as a seed falls from a tree and gets blown somewhere random, and once it lands on fertile soil, it plants itself, right? It roots itself. It embeds itself into that womb of darkness, of the unknown that we don't get to see or readily feel, but we know it's there, right? It's inside of us or around us or however we want to interpret the energy. That's the part of the soul where that where we dwell. That's where the soul dwells. Where we dwell, the ego, the mind, it dwells on the outside. It is the outside surface. It is the sensory organ. So everything about embracing patience for the outside of me felt like anxiety. It felt like everything was going glacially slow, and I was just so unhappy because I was just watching everything around me feel like it was moving so fast, and I just felt so sedentary. And until I was really honest with myself and said, well, why do you feel this way? I started to get into my feels, and I was like, well, I've always thought that in order to succeed, I'm supposed to do it this way and be a perfectionist and make it be the best it can be before anyone else can see it. And then it's like, well, that might be why you're causing yourself stress. Like no one knows what you're creating until you put it out there. So when you're in the draft phase, that's your time to shine and play and not care, because you don't have to. They're drafts. But I found myself going through drafts of life. Junior high, high school, college, these are different drafts of life, right? Where I thought, well, as long as I do my very best in this part of this timeline at this timestamp, if I do my very, very, very best, even if I pass the board, I got to do my very best at this one so I get that perfect score. Now I've wasted hours trying to beat my own score at what I think is my boss level, and it's literally the intermediate level. It's nowhere near boss level, right? And so emotionally, a lot of us get stuck there. And no matter how old we are, there are people who are still emotionally stuck at a certain age or timeline where they're like, had I just did this that way, had I just did this perfectly this way, this would be a whole different life. Possibly, probably, who knows, right? I think the key to all of this was remembering that if you don't allow yourself to embrace patience, then you won't ever trust any progress in anything. You won't trust your own thought process, which is what I was saying, like in those first 3 days when I'm like, oh, I don't believe it. I'm still thinking about it. I think it. No, that was me not trusting my own process, not trusting my own emotions when I would get upset or feel defeated. That was me not trusting my own process of rest, because no one says it has to be done today. No one says it has to be done today, okay? If it is about you and spirit and creation working through whatever you need to work through, it will take you time, months, years, decades. When you say those words, it sounds like so much time, but really stop and think right now. Where were you 10 years ago? And really think about who did you hang out with? What was your favorite snack? What was your favorite go-to place? Why? Do you still want to go to those places? There's nothing wrong with that, but is your mindset still there? Are you still like in that place of that's who I used to be, so therefore that is me? Or do you see that like I outgrew it and that's okay? There's nothing wrong with that, right? Outgrowing something is a form of spiritual rest because your body is saying, I don't get the same thrill out of this, or I don't necessarily need this anymore. So when you stop forcing yourself into situations and scenarios that don't belong to you, then you actually start to again come back to that center of emotional homeostasis, spiritual homeostasis, the foundation of when we talk about meditation and love and patience and learning all these things that come with experience, because it is so hard to appreciate love if you've only lived on the other side of hate, right? If you only know what hate looks like and how it shows up, then you, in some weird Stockholm syndrome way, learn how to love it because you're like, well, this is my life. I may as well accept it, right? And then it becomes the identity. This is where you see people where you can tell they're not happy, they're frustrated, they don't look like they belong there. It's because they probably don't, but we've learned how to mask so well that we again don't trust the process of rest. Rest to me is not just sleep. Rest again is taking the time to breathe. Thoughts, breathe. Emotions, breathe. Function, breathe. Purpose, breathe. Movement, it's all the same thing. Because if we really don't slow down as humans and remember that we are a species, just like every other creature on this earth, we are disposable, just how we are to every other resource on this earth. There's no way of getting around how we have convinced ourselves that we're more superior because we can hurt or take or destroy. If we lived forever, sure, I could see that thought, but we don't live forever. And so it's a very minuscule part of our acceptance that we live by and then wonder why we're not able to walk into our most authentic selves. This is where balancing rest and ambition come in. You have to really know that life is going to keep being life regardless of how we dress, how we talk, how much money we make, where we live, all that. You will still be a human, naked and afraid if you were thrown in the middle of the woods, right? Like, you would still, or you might not be afraid. I know there's some people out there who are survivalists who love that. But the point is, you still have to go back to your most basic instincts, your most basic needs of, okay, it's daytime. I got to get across this playing in so many hours before it gets nighttime and it's cold and it's wet, and then I'm going to be out here shivering and all exposed, right? Back in his time, our ancestors had the time to learn ways to improve their life. We are living the byproduct of their hard work. This whole existence is now in a time of rest, which is why we have time to conjure up all of these thoughts and opinions and beliefs around the world versus really just trusting ourselves and staying connected to source. We are at a point in life where striking a healthy balance between pushing ourselves and wanting to reach our aspirations while recognizing that we have to take time to step back and offer ourselves the opportunity to rest. I think we're finally at that place where we're accepting it. This is what I consider to be emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is all about recognizing what belongs to you, what doesn't belong to you, what you want to keep, what you want to discard, all of the above. And so when we're able to find that equilibrium between rest and progress in our various aspects of life is when we start understanding how the blueprint is being laid out for us. Everything has its purpose. I know it does not sound motivating to say that, right? Because we're going through some dark times. And so it's like, well, what's the purpose of this? And what's the purpose of that? Those are all beautiful philosophical thoughts. But what's the purpose of an anthill in the middle of a sidewalk, right? Do you walk around it or do you destroy it? That's a choice of free will in the human world. We make choices in our human world all the time that then affect each other. But if we saw that same anthill and just chose to walk around it because we have no reason to bother it or disturb it, this is the same of the universe for us. Sometimes somebody might walk by and their foot, it's heavy and they drag their foot across it and they didn't see it and they destroy the whole little ant village, right? Was that person maliceful? Was that person trying to be evil? Not necessarily. I think there are spirits in this world that do enjoy destroying, and there's spirits in this world who don't mean to destroy. But it's a part of the process of growth, right? I think we have to start learning how to see that when we feel like we're supposed to do something, we allow ourselves to do it within our own time frame of research and asking questions and listening empathetically, not just logically, where what we've been taught and what we know and our beliefs on something, but our actual faith and actual proof of our own history. We as individuals, all collectively, are the specks. We are the specks of the soul. We are those little intricate parts that you don't see it from far back, but up close, it's doing its part. It's making that whole picture look full. And if you take away a few specks over time, you're going to notice a gap or a hole or something that is meant to be there. This is why we as humans have to learn how to rest. We have to learn how to listen. We have to learn how to empathize with the human self first. When we empathize with the human self first, the soul then takes precedent on itself to say, I can no longer blame this human existence because this human avatar that I exist in right now, they're doing all the work. This is for all my babies who are doing all the work. Understand you are not alone. Keep doing all your work because then you become the vessel that you want to be worked through. Each of us gets to mold how the universe whistles through us, right? However you carve your whistle is how the elements will work through. The air is still the air. The air doesn't change when it goes through the whistle. It's just going through a different pressure, chamber, vortex frequency. It comes out a different frequency. However, I'm sure there's experts on whistles. But the point I'm trying to make is that we are all meant to make a certain sound. We're meant to have a certain frequency, vibration on how we truly feel about ourselves. And when we do that, that's how you see someone's confidence. That's how you see someone's energy, their personality, because they know who they are. They took the time to rest in themselves and figure out who they are. Then the soul again is like, wow, I didn't do that in my past life. I was so focused on being a part of the crowd that I got lost in translation. And that's the part where it's important that we are resting enough to trust the process to then progress into our most authentic self. The soul wants you to be its most authentic vessel because it's like a video game for the soul. The soul gets to level up. Each time the avatar does the work, the soul gets activated on a whole nother spectrum, and then it gets to level up. And then when we talk about manifestation and calling in energy, every time we level up, we get to step into that room, we get to step into that zone, whatever it might be, and it just comes naturally to us. And then to other people, they're looking around like, why are you so talented at this? Why are you so good at this? And you're like, I don't know what you're talking about. It's because you have rest. People are seeing rest in your soul. They're seeing rest in your spirit. They're seeing rest in your eyes because you're not running around trying to be like everyone else. You're not running around trying to make yourself fit into someone else's script. This is what we need to remember on this journey of spirituality. It's not going to be easy, but this is why we are all specks of the universe in soul consciousness, sailing through the healing abyss. Thank you guys for joining me on the first podcast of Soul Specks. We are a tribe of healers who are healing healers who are then able to go out and heal the rest of the world. This is my tribe. I'm calling out to you. I hope you join me too. Thank you.